it is, and where I come from, my agency. We'll talk about why employment is good. And then we're going to talk about some employment myths. So sometimes people are nervous about going to work because they've heard things. And so we want to talk about what those myths are. And then in the big employment conversation that you might be having with your employment specialist, we want to consider options like conversations surrounding education or employment. So sometimes people don't realize that there are multiple options out there in the world, and we want to just make sure that you have that knowledge. It's also, there are some specific considerations to consider when we're thinking about employment and making a plan. And then there are just some general employment topics. So sometimes individuals who haven't had a very long work history, or maybe there's gaps in a work history, they might have some specific questions about certain topics about going to work and what that means for them. And another topic that we have been training on recently is developing a strong work ethic. So as people join the workforce, in order to maintain employment over time, it's important to develop a strong work ethic, and we'll talk about what that means and how you can do that. We also want to just cover the basics. So there's some benefit information and being able to maintain health care, so Medicaid and Medicare benefits. So that's kind of a lot of information that we're going to try and tackle today. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions, we'll stop during some of the big breaks between topics and make sure that you can ask any questions that you have. When we get to the benefit specific questions, I just want to point out that today it's really talking about general information. But if you have a specific question regarding your situation, why don't you message me later, like email or send me a phone call, and we can talk about that specifically at that time. So thank you for joining us today, and let's go ahead and get started. So the New York Employment Services System, I want to give you a little bit of history about how we came to be. So a long time ago, the New York State Department of Labor and the Office of Mental Health came together, and they recognized that there was a gap of employment resources in the state of New York. And so they came up with a plan to create the New York Employment Services System. And our unit is charged with getting resources to people across the state, in talking about employment, talking about benefits, and sharing as much information as we possibly can. The other agencies on this slide are partners. So we partner with all of these other state agencies to help get the word out and to get resources out to as many people as we possibly can. And as we take a look at NYESS, aside from the statewide partnership, we are also a collaborative employment services case management system. And that's a lot of words. What does that mean? That means that we have a database, a computer database of information about employment for people across the state of New York. And we can use that information. The next bullet says the primary employment services data source. So we use that information to help legislators and policymakers in New York identify information about what people need in order to be successfully employed. So we can share that information in order to help make policies and procedures for the state of New York. But above all that, our primary focus is being a resource for all things related to employment. And as I mentioned, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. We would be happy to help you. As we move into this next step, I want to talk about employment and why it's such a good idea. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'm not sure if I should go to work or not. I don't know if that's something that's good for me. And how can you find out? How do you figure out whether or not working would be a good idea for you personally? So I want to give you some information about some research. So research has shown that employment is considered a social determinant of health. And what that means is that when a person goes to work, there are a lot of areas of their life that see improvement. So not only can you earn more money, but your physical and mental health shows signs of improvement. It allows a person to get out into the world in a socialization with coworkers, supervisors, and other people that you collaborate with. It also allows for you to have a meaningful activity or a purpose during your day, things that you can share with others, your purpose. It also improves an individual's self-worth, and it improves a work ethic for individuals who are looking for stabilized or maintaining stabilized employment. And overall, people have found that there's an improved quality of life. So not only do you feel better about yourself and about things that are happening in your life, but it gives you a new sense of purpose to for your future, for things that you plan to do in the future. So it's really a good idea. There's a lot of physical and mental and positive um, areas of your life that can be improved. It also reduces the need for interventions. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. And that is people who are looking for employment sometimes need some supports on the job. And as long as there are supports available, it may reduce the need for interventions in other areas, as long as you have those supports in place. So as we think about going to work, and I know the public benefits piece is really important to consider. So it's a good idea for you to go to work even if you're on public benefits, and we're going to help you understand why that is. Typically, people will get more money in their pocket, and they're not penalized for working while they receive Social Security benefits. But it's really important that you report your income to Social Security on a monthly basis. So if you work in January, by February 6th, you must have reported your income to Social Security so that they know what's happening and there won't be a lag in your benefits or a potential overpayment. In addition, individuals will be eligible for free Medicaid in almost all scenarios. And when we start talking about benefits, we'll cover that section. And then something that we need to acknowledge, and that is that there are some common frustrations associated with public benefits, and those are real. And they need to be a part of this employment conversation so that we can all understand what those frustrations are. And unfortunately, every social service agency has a different rule for what their eligibility criteria are. And it's very difficult to remember all of those pieces. So if we can make that a part of our conversation when we're talking about employment, that's a great idea, because then it can all be laid out on the table and what each benefit is going to entail and how it may be impacted when you go to work. We will talk more about that as well when we talk about the benefits section. And this is my 5-minute commercial. I told you about that already. So benefits advisement resources and information must be within everyone's reach. So anybody who is receiving any type of public benefit, and it doesn't have to just be Social Security, but they should be connected to a certified benefits advisor. And so again, I don't know if OHEL has a specific person that you might refer to, but if you need someone and you can't find one, please reach out to NYESS and we will be able to help you get connected to somebody. And one of the things that's important to realize is that every person's situation is slightly different. So even if two people are on the same benefits, their situation might be very different based on other factors. And so a benefits advisor is a great idea for each individual person to have that information. And again, I guess if you don't have a go-to benefits advisor, please reach out to NYESS. We'd be able to help you with that. We also want to offer that it's a good idea to have a website that you can go to for information on benefits. And you can reach out to NYESS. We can connect you with benefits information that way. On our website, and it's not listed here, but it's nyess.ny.gov. And if you go to that specific website under the customer tab, you will find information about a variety of different benefits. So I know that this training is being recorded, so you ought to be able to get that information or follow up with us. We'd be happy to help you connect there. Okay, any questions so far before we move on to the next section? Okay, then I
Sorry,
will.
we have
Oh,
some questions in the room here. Will we get your contact information?
yes, it is located on the front slide and the last slide of this PowerPoint, and you're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint. Yes.
Perfect. We have another question. Yes, go ahead. Okay, the question was, what type of benefits are there aside from Social Security? I think we're going to get to a lot of that information during today's webinar.
Yeah, I was looking at public benefits could include things like SNAP, which is food stamps, or TANF, or SSI, SSDI, and there's HEAP, which is the heating benefit. So those are the ones I was referring to. Any other questions? Okay. So this next section is about employment myths. And one of the things that I want to mention just right off the top is that it takes a long time to get SSI and SSDI benefits. So people are sometimes anxious about going to work if they think they might lose those benefits. And so that also should be part of that employment conversation. What happens when you go to work, and how will my benefits be impacted? Additionally, friends and family have typically heard stories about what happens when somebody goes to work and then they lose their benefits or there's overpayments, and it's scary. And so they might be less encouraging for someone to go to work in that regard. Additionally, sometimes a person's Social Security benefits are a part of the family budget. And if there's a potential for you to lose those guaranteed benefits, people are not really excited about going to work. That makes them nervous. It makes the entire family concerned about what might happen. So today we want to talk about some myths that are out there in the world, and we want to talk about them so that we can tell you what the truth is behind each of the myths. So, and if you have other myths that you know about or things that you're thinking about going to work and you want to ask that question, absolutely let me know that. We can cover that. So the first myth is I can only work 20 hours per week if I want to keep my benefits. And while the number of hours a person works is one of those variables about keeping benefits, it's not the whole story. So the benefit type is really important. If a person's getting SSI benefits or SSDI benefits, that can make a big difference. It also matters what the hourly wage is. So in upstate New York, the hourly wage is a little different than the New York City hourly wage. And so that's a consideration when we're thinking about employment services. We also want to talk about work incentives. So Social Security has created various work incentives to help people in their process of going back to work to be able to maintain that benefit as long as possible. So it's really not all about the number of hours a person works. There's a lot of other variables associated with going to work. So again, a certified benefits advisor would be the person that can clarify your specific situation to talk about how it will be impacted. The next employment myth is I have a disability, so I can't go to work. And I just wanted to mention that Social Security recognizes that people who receive SSA disability benefits can work. And because of that, they created what's called the Ticket to Work program. And this is a program to encourage people to go to work and gain financial self-sufficiency. If you're interested in the Ticket to Work program, These are the criteria to be eligible. So you have to receive either SSI and or SSDI benefits. You have to be between the ages of 18 and 64. You want to go to work and you agree to reduce your reliance on SSA benefits. So reducing reliance just means that if you're getting SSI and you go to work and you earn some wages, that your SSI payment might be less, but your wages that you're getting from the job are going to replace some of that SSI payment. So you're still earning at least the same or more money by going to work. And then I also wanted to stress that this is a voluntary program. You don't have to participate in it if you don't want to. And if you choose not to participate, it will not impact your Social Security benefits. But it is available if you're interested in going to work, and they can give you additional support through employment services that you get at no cost. And that can include a certified benefits advisor to help you navigate going to work. So the Ticket to Work program is just an option for you if you're interested in going to work. And just know that if you do have a disability and you want to go to work, there are options for you to do that. Another myth is that, well, I can't go to work until I'm considered stable by my psychiatrist or my treatment team. And I want to let you know that individuals do not have to be considered ready or stable or even compliant with your medications before you go to work. That's just not true. So there are supports that can be available to a person to help them get a job and to maintain a job, even while they're managing barriers to employment. So you may have specific barriers to overcome to get a job, mental health symptoms, maybe you have some housing or transportation needs, or maybe you have some educational needs that need to be managed first. But I want to just mention that individuals that are homeless or managing symptoms can still get a job and maintain that job as long as they have the right supports in place. And so as you're working with an employment specialist, figuring out what kinds of things you're going to need when you get to the job site, helping that person identify what supports you need is a vital part of you being able to get a job and maintain that employment. So it's not about being ready or stable. It's really about having the supports that you have in place. Another employment myth is that if I go to work, I'm going to lose my health care benefits. And this is a huge concern for many, many people because it's super important for us to have health care, right? And we want to make sure that we can hang on to our Medicaid coverage or the Medicare coverage, whichever one you have, because it's really important to be able to get the services you need, the medications, the therapy services, maybe other types of personal services that you're getting through that healthcare system. And I want to just let you know that there are ways for you to maintain both Medicaid and Medicare, depending on the type you're on, if you go to work and you're earning more than the allowable for that benefit type. So if you're on Social Security SSI, you may have specific requirements. You can only earn so much money. But you still may be eligible for two different Medicaid programs, the Medicaid 1619B, which we'll talk about in more detail, and there's a Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities. Also, a very great program for people to get and maintain their Medicaid coverage while working. And then those of you that might be on SSDI benefits might also get Medicare coverage. And there are ways to get premium-free Medicare coverage during the course of going back to work. So when we get to the benefits basics section, we're going to talk more about these three options. Another employment myth is if I stop working, I'm going to have to reapply for benefits all over again, and it takes too much time. So this is an indication that someone goes to work and they're successfully employed, and then something happens and they lose their job or they decrease their hours, and now they don't have their benefit to rely on and they don't have enough money coming in. And that's a scary scenario for people. So we want to just mention This is true for both SSI and SSDI benefits. If you go to work and you're replacing your benefits with wages from your employer, and then you stop receiving your SSA check. So everything's successful. You've gone to work and it looks great. And then for some reason, your wages fall below that SGA level, substantial gainful activity is what that's called, or you stop working altogether for some reason. Within 5 years of when the benefit was terminated, then there's this thing called an expedited reinstatement. You can call Social Security and say, I want to have my benefits reinstated. I've fallen below that SGA level and I need to have my benefits back. And while Social Security has 6 months to determine whether or not you're entitled to get your benefits back, you can ask for your benefit check while they're making their decision. And if they say no, you still get to keep that money. You don't have to pay it back. So that's a huge benefit for people, and it's kind of a safety net. So if this happens within 5 years of the benefit being terminated, you still have the ability to get back your benefit without having to reapply for benefits all over again. We will talk about that again a little bit later in today's presentation. Another myth is that if I participate in Ticket to Work, I'll still have to have a continuing disability review. And I want to let you know that that's absolutely not true. So there are a couple of caveats to that, but Social Security recognizes that you're going to work and they will exempt you from having to do a continuing disability review if you're in the Ticket to Work program. But the caveat is that you have to be making timely progress. So Social Security expects that you are fully engaged in the Ticket to Work program and that you are making progress. And timely progress means that you're going on interviews, you're preparing for interviews like resume and interview skills and developing the resume and getting out into interviews and getting a job and maintaining a job. But it could also be education. So you could be in an approved educational program and still be making timely progress according to Social Security. So all those things are really important to know about, but knowing that you can be exempt from the continuing disability review if you're really serious and engaged in the Ticket to Work program. And that's a great benefit for people. I know the continuing disability review it's kind of a pain in the neck to do it, to schedule it, to go wherever you need to go. And it's probably very frustrating and stressful to think about if they say I don't get my benefits, what am I going to do? So it's really important to be able to engage in Ticket to Work and fully engage so that you're not doing the continuing disability review. There's also a myth out there about, well, if I go to work, there's really nobody that can help me. And that's not true because we have a lot of resources in the state of New York. And one of the first and foremost I want to say is, oh, hell, you're working with them right now. And they're providing services for you to go to work, employment services. And that can include a lot of different kinds of service. So that would be the first thing is to check with your employment specialist and to check in with that department to see what kind of resources they can help you with. There are also the New York State Department of Labor. They have career centers statewide. They also have what's called disability resource coordinators or program managers. And those are people who are certified benefits advisors across the state of New York. The program managers are in New York City, and the disability resource coordinators are in upstate New York. So wherever your location, if you're in need of any types of those services, they are available. We also mentioned Ticket to Work a minute ago, and that is one of the resources that you have to be able to help get support while you're going to work. And then NYESS, I want to just put a plug in for NYESS that we are a resource for employment related questions and referrals. And as we get information, we want to share it. And so we want to share that on our website. And we oftentimes send out information to people about what's happening in the state. Okay. Another is if I want to work, I can just work for cash under the table and Social Security won't know, so it won't affect my Social Security disability benefits. And I just want to throw this out there that Social Security will eventually find out. And when they do, they will consider this fraud, Social Security fraud. And the potential will be that you will lose your Social Security and your Medicaid benefits. And one of the things that one of my colleagues mentioned was in his experience, people who are working under the table seem to be doing great, seem to be fine, but people get jealous of that scenario. And his experience has been that friends and family members have reported that individual to Social Security. And you might say, oh no, my family would never do that. But one of the things to think about is if you get caught, what are the consequences? And so that's a decision that you'll have to weigh for yourself. But I would encourage you to not work under the table for cash and to find employment that's called competitive integrated employment. And that is a phrase that you're probably going to hear a lot about in this next year. We are now considered an employment first state. And that part of that means that competitive integrated employment is the expectation. Working for competitive pay in a situation where you have the ability to be promoted to another position by an employer that is hiring people with disabilities and without disabilities. So that's what competitive integrated employment means. And that's what New York is striving for as an expectation for the people that we serve. Do you have any questions about the employment myths section? Okay, shall we move on to the next section?
Yeah, we have some questions in this room. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I recently lost my ticket to work from NYESS. And I talked to somebody from another ticket to work program, and they told me it'd be preferable for me to work full time. And then I would lose my SSD and maybe my SSI also. And now I didn't feel comfortable doing that, so I do not have a ticket to work now. Is this good advice that he gave me not to do it if I don't want to go working full time?
Okay. So, it's about what you want to do. So it's absolutely fine that the decision that you made to work or not work full time or part time.
Part-time. I would love to work part-time, but full-time is too much for me at the present
Okay,
time.
yeah, and that's totally fine. So Ticket to Work, in their requirements, they expect people to create a short-term goal and a long-term goal. And one of their requirements is about making sure, I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but the long-term goal is related to SGA, substantial gainful activity. And if a person is earning substantial gainful activity level, eventually they will work themselves off of Social Security benefits. So it depends on your specific situation and what work incentives you have available to you and the specific benefit type. So there's a lot of variables in there, makes it a little bit muddy. But in general, if you're working full time, you're probably going to reach that SGA level. And then you would be working off of benefits, which is completely fine if that's what you want to do. But if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. It's up to you to make that decision.
Wasn't good enough help.
Mhm.
Probably you have another question?
Okay.
Yes, if you're not on a ticket to work program and you find a job and you, let's say, get fired or you thought that it's not for you, is there a 6-month period where you can go back to Social Security benefits, or what's the case?
So Ticket to Work is separate from your Social Security disability benefits. It's a whole different program. So if you go to work and you're not in the Ticket to Work program, that's completely fine. That in and of itself will not affect your benefits, but you go to work and you're earning more money, so you lose your benefit, you can get your Social Security disability benefits back if it has been within 5 years of the termination date. So
Okay, so
if
it's-
in
okay.
January you started working and you lost your benefits, you replaced your benefits with wages. And then in June, it was not working for you and you quit your job. Then at that point, you could contact Social Security to ask for that expedited reinstatement of your benefits and say, I'm no longer working, I need my benefit back. And they have time to be able to review the situation and see if you are entitled to get your benefit back. But that is typically true if it's within that 5-year period of that termination.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
I thought this differs from the program, Ticket to Work, but it's the same amount, 5 years, okay. Thanks.
Yep.
You have one more question.
Yeah, I have a question. If you're getting SSDI, how much money are you allowed to make per month that you won't lose any benefits?
So that's a good question, and we're going to talk more specifically about that a little bit later today. But just in general, depending on where you are in getting your benefits, it makes a difference. So if you just got your benefit today and you start to go to work tomorrow, you have 9 months of time. It's called the trial work period to earn as much money as you want to before, and it won't impact your benefits at all. But then after that period of time, then it relies on SGA level. And we'll talk about that specifically when we get there.
What were you just talking about when you get your benefits? You just said you just get your benefits and then you start working? What is that, like the first day you get your benefits? I don't understand.
So if you got your benefit today, SSDI benefits today, and then 3 weeks from now you decide to go to work, you have what's called a trial work period. That's 9 months of time that you can work and earn as much money as you want to. That will not impact your benefits at all. That's what I was talking about.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the room? Okay, we're good.
Okay. So the next thing we want to start with is called conversations, education or employment. So sometimes when somebody comes in to get services, there's a lot of things floating around, like, should I go to work? Should I not go to work? Maybe I should go to school. Maybe I should get a certification. So there's a lot of questions, but oftentimes not a lot of answers right away. So this section talks a little bit about that process. So one of the things that is important to think about is if you come into this program, an employment services program, and you're thinking about going to school or you're thinking about going to work, those are things to bring up right away, to think about those things. And it doesn't mean that you have everything figured out, and it doesn't mean that you're committing to anything specific, but it just means that you've opened the conversation about those topics. And that can be an important start for your future. Whatever kinds of goals you might have for yourself or thinking about the future. Maybe you don't really have any goals right now, but this will allow you to start thinking about options and different things that might be important to you in the future. So as you get started with services, somebody should start asking you some of these questions. Like, what kinds of things do you want to work on? What are your goals? What kinds of things are you interested in doing? Have you ever thought about working before? And then if you've ever worked, what did you like about it? And what didn't you like about it? Because oftentimes it's really important to know what you're not interested in doing in the future based on what your previous work experiences looked like. And that can be a big, impactful decision. And if so, think about if you've worked before, what were your challenges? What kinds of things did you struggle with? Maybe transportation getting to and from work. Maybe it was childcare issues. Maybe it was something else entirely different, and you're thinking about what those challenges are right now, so you can have a backup plan in place to make sure that those things are taken care of, or some support in place to help you manage those challenges. And then when you think about interested in working or education or exploring options, there are a lot of things out in the world that are available to us today, and we should consider what those things mean to you personally and what might work for you. So this start of the conversation is just thinking about and figuring out the direction of where you're going to go next and how you're going to proceed through this process. What kinds of things are important to you? What kinds of things do you think you might want to do in the future? And how can you get there? So, excuse me, a couple of options. So thinking about what you're interested in doing initially. So what kinds of things do I want to do for a job in the future? Does it look like you want to go to school and get a certificate in something? Or are you interested in getting a job right away? And so if you're not really sure, sometimes people will say, I want to work, but I don't know what I want to do. And so there's a thing called an interest inventory. And I've put the links in here for the Department of Labor's ONET interest inventory. It's called My Next Move. And there's an English version and a Spanish version listed there. And this is a great opportunity for you to answer a list of questions. Do I want to do this? How interested am I in doing that? So it might be building cabinets. Are you interested in doing that? Are you interested in helping somebody learn sports or learning a dance routine or exercise? Or it could be a lot of different types of options out there. But it allows you to answer these questions and mark yes or no, or the degree to which you're interested in that. Very interested or not at all interested. And then at the end, it will give you a snapshot of those things that you're interested in and what jobs they are related to. And so from there, you can use that information to figure out if you're interested in pursuing any of those employment options. Any questions before we move on to that next section? Okay, so we're going to talk both about education and employment, but we're going to start with education. So somebody might go into these conversations thinking about, yeah, I might be interested in going back to school. But what is it that you might be interested in about school? So it could be someone who's interested in getting their GED or a high school equivalency degree, or maybe you're interested in going to college, or maybe vocational school. Maybe you'd like to learn a vocation, or maybe attending an apprenticeship, learning something on the job learning, and getting paid while you're learning that specific trade. And so those are a lot of different options. Also, when you think about like college, a community college sometimes offers you the opportunities to get certifications in various things. If you are interested in using Microsoft Word, but you don't have a lot of experience with Microsoft tools, maybe you get a certification in Microsoft. That's an option. So you can think about a lot of different types of educational experiences. And so these are some questions to ask or to think about. Why is it that you want to go to school? Do you want to go because you're interested in learning, or because you want to get a certification so that you can improve your job that you currently have? Or maybe you just want to go because you feel better about yourself if you get that high school diploma. So whatever your thoughts are behind that, like thinking about why you might want to do that. And then thinking about what you want to study specifically. Like if you're interested in an apprenticeship program, maybe you want to be a carpenter. and you want to learn carpentry skills, and you need to find an apprenticeship program that will help you learn those skills. And so that's an option. And then where would you go? So thinking about your specific living situation, where you're located, is that training program available to you where you're at? Or will you have to move to a different location in order to get that training you want? And is that a possibility for you? So thinking about those options, like where do you want to go and is it available to you in your specific area? And then thinking about what degree or certification, diploma, or license that you might be interested in getting. So thinking about these things, and you can brainstorm these ideas with your employment specialist. Thinking about, is this a good fit for you? Is this something that you would benefit from? And all the reasons you want to do it. And of course, some of us make goals and we make pros and cons lists. So you might say, these are the reasons to do it. And these are the reasons maybe now is not the right time to do it. So you have pros and cons for that situation, and then figuring out which direction to go based on that information, kind of weighing those options and then making a decision. And it's always a good idea to talk with your employment specialist and think about what their opinion is, like getting other people's opinions, maybe your family, maybe your friends, maybe your employment specialist, and open up the conversation about the different options that might be available to you and how you might obtain those things. And this slide just talks about things about education. So thinking about your interests that you have and the skills and abilities that you currently have, or the skills and the abilities that you want to get in the future. Thinking about what the benefits of more education might be. Is it going to be worth it to go? Who's going to pay for it? What's the, are there grants or scholarships available to me? What is the career pathway to reach the goal? So one of my examples might be someone who starts working as a CNA, certified nursing assistant, but that person really wants to be a registered nurse in the future. So they start as a CNA, and then they go back to school and they get the LPN. And then over time, they go back to school and they get their RN. So it's a pathway to reach that goal. It might take you several years to get to that end goal. It's probably not going to be immediate, but it's a pathway to get there. And you're on track each step of the way that you get there. And then, does the career goal require more education? There may be goals out there that are not going to require you to get any more education. You could be happy at the job and not need to get any certifications. Do you really need that? The other question is, do you want it? Do you need it? Yes or no for your job, or do you just want it? And will that help you in other ways? So when we think about education, we want to consider all of the questions that are out there. What makes sense for you? And being able to talk it over, like with your employment specialist, thinking about these options. And then these are just some other general questions to think about. So what program at what school is going to be the best? How long will this program take? If you're going to a certification class, it might be 6 weeks. Can you commit to a 6-week program? Or if it's an associate's degree, can you wait for 2 years? Can you actually commit to that program for a couple of years? An apprenticeship program might be 18 months, year and a half. Can you commit to an 18-month program? And then what is the cost of that program and where is that funding coming from? What degree or certification will you get? And how will the education help you reach your goals? And then should you attend online or in-person classes? So some of the more formal education, like at community colleges, have options to attend online or in person. And some people really need that in-person view with a professor, and some people can do it online. So it kind of depends on what you're looking at and what's available to you at the time. So these are just some general questions about education. So if you're coming to this from an educational standpoint, what makes sense to you, for you, in your specific situation? Do you have any questions about education? Okay. The next section is on employment. And so when we're thinking about employment, it's really a good idea to talk about all of the things that are out there related to employment and thinking about what you're looking for. Like, what are your goals and what does success mean to you? Because when we think about success, it's different for everybody. And how do we know that this job is going to help you be successful or feel successful? And so identifying what success means to you is going to be important in the long term to figure out what goal is appropriate. So sometimes it can just mean having more money. I just want more money in my pocket and I'm going to be successful. And that's completely fine. Maybe just getting a job or maintaining that job for a period of time. Maybe it's increased independence, being able to get a job and then moving out of your parents' home and living on your own. Maybe it's going to school, getting that degree, or going to school so you can advance at your job. Maybe it's getting a job and still receiving your Social Security benefits. And maybe it's getting a job and getting rid of your Social Security benefits, replacing those benefits with wages. So that would be the first thing to define is what is important to you and what is your success? How do you view success from that perspective? And then once you have that figured out, what that means to you, then it can mean different things to different people about employment. So it could be a job training program, help you build some skills while you're working on thinking about employment. It could be an internship or an apprenticeship program. It could include working part-time or working full-time. It could include volunteer experiences, and that is a great way to build skills, especially for someone that may have had a gap of employment, and they can fill that gap with some of the skills that they've learned through a volunteer experience. It could also include working in person, going to the office or going to the job, or being able to work remotely at your house, or a combination of both of those things, telecommuting on and off during the day or during the week. So those are some other things that's a good idea to think about and figure out what is really important to you, what you are interested in doing. Any questions about education or employment before we move on?
I have problems with my credit history. Is it possible for me to get student loans anyway? Do student loans take that into account? So
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear the first part of the question.
Sorry, can I repeat your question?
What's that?
Yeah.
The question is, if someone has problems with a credit history, is there a possibility for them to get student loans?
So credit history does play a part in the ability to get a student loan, but it kind of depends on the specific scenario. So it is something absolutely worth checking into. With your specific scenario, I don't know exactly, all the details. So I would still recommend that whatever school you decide to go to, that you can make an appointment with their financial aid office and talk to them about student loans specifically.
maybe they even have scholarships, I don't know.
Absolutely, there are grants and scholarships. Yep, absolutely. Yep, there are options for sure.
Doesn't Ticket to Work pay for some school? Because I went to school through Ticket to Work.
Does Ticket to Work pay for school? So Ticket to Work is a Social Security program that does not necessarily pay for school, but it supports it supports employment services. So you may go to school while you're in the Ticket to Work program, but there may be other entities paying for that for you to go to school. It doesn't come out of the Social Security checkbook for Ticket to Work.
Yes, what's the amount of money you can make if you're working part-time for SSI in order not to to keep your benefits intact.
So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but yes, there are ways for you to keep your benefits and still go to work. And mostly that's related to work incentives, and we'll talk about those.
Okay, we have another question.
Yes, if someone started working about 2 months ago and, they didn't report their income yet, but they didn't get paid yet. That will affect them, or, and how should they report their earnings?
I'm having trouble hearing. It's something about not reporting your wages.
I'll try to repeat the question, but clarify, if someone started working 2 months ago,
Yeah,
but hasn't yet gotten paid,
yes.
okay, what's the
And
question?
reported, they didn't also report.
And they didn't report it either yet.
So the person is working, like 2 months ago, they started a new job and they haven't gotten paid yet.
Yes.
That would be my first concern. Yeah, I would definitely talk to the employer, the HR department, and want to know why that person has not gotten paid. So oftentimes people get paid on a weekly basis or every other week, and sometimes once a month. But if they haven't gotten paid in 2 months, then that's a problem. That's a big problem. Then the other thing that you asked about was, once they do get that check, once they do get paid, then they need to report that to Social Security. They don't have to report it now if they haven't gotten paid. But once they get that check, then yes, they do need to report that. Wow, that would be scary, wouldn't it? To start a new job and not get a check for a couple months?
Yes. Okay, do we have any other questions in the room? Okay, if any questions, from anyone on Zoom, feel free to put them in the chat.
Okay, let me check the chat real quick. Make sure. Nope, I don't see anything in the chat. Okay. So as we continue our conversation, we want to talk about making a plan and other considerations. So other things that might come up. And this is really for you to just think about and take the information, because you'll have the PowerPoint. So taking the information and kind of thinking about these considerations when you want to go to work. So as you plan for employment, you're likely going to be creating a work plan with your employment specialist that's going to include the services that you're going to receive from them. And so while you're adding important information to the plan, be sure to include specific information about what you need and how it's going to be implemented. And so I want to give you some examples, and we don't have to go through all of these examples because there's a couple pages of it. But just to give you an example, so if a person is going to go to work and you're going to plan to take your medications at work, discuss how to arrange that so that you have privacy to be able to maintain that privacy at work. And then discussing how schedules based on medication being taken and any side effects. For example, if a person takes their medication at bedtime, then when they wake up in the morning, they might be very groggy. And if that's true, maybe a second shift job is better for somebody than a first shift job. So thinking about how those things work interactively. And then discussing arranged work schedules based on attending required medical appointments. If a person has to go to a doctor frequently for whatever reason, then we have to arrange that with the employer, right? So maybe you take a second shift job so you can go to the doctor in the morning, or maybe you're going to get time off work in order to do that, but it's going to be approved ahead of time, like through a job accommodation. They're going to be able to let you take time off to go to that doctor's appointment because you are required to do that. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're thinking about adding services to a plan or thinking about how these things will impact you when you go to work. So another thing that might come up, daily living skills. So discussing budgeting. So if you're going to work and you're getting a check, and now you need to think about how I'm going to budget my money for the month. So think about financial management and talk to your employment specialist about how to arrange this or how to do a budget. Because you're going to probably need to think about transportation, how you're going to get to and from work. You may need to think about clothing or protective equipment. If you're going to be working on a job site, like a construction site, you might need steel-toed shoes. So those kinds of things are important. Discussing the preparation for work in terms of, every day when I get up in the morning, I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to have clean clothes. I'm going to get up and get ready on time, and I'm going to leave on time. So maybe making sure that you have an alarm that you can set to make you meet those schedules. And then discuss reporting earnings to Social Security. As I mentioned, it's very important to report those earnings immediately to Social Security, so that can prevent financial woes like overpayments or fees that you might be required to pay. And then for socialization. So this is another area that sometimes we skip thinking about or talking about, but it's important to know. Discussing how you socialize with people at work and how to set appropriate boundaries. So it's always good, to make friends at work and to have coworkers that you can chat with or laugh with. That's really good. That's fun. But it's also important to be able to draw boundaries and making sure that we're not sharing too much personal information. Or I don't know if you've all heard that thing about workplace romances. So you never get involved with somebody at work, because if you do and then you break up, then it creates drama for the team or drama in the workplace. So that might be another thing to think about moving into that scenario. Discuss how to appropriately share personal information and interactions with customers and the public. So this is just a snapshot of some of the things to consider when you're going to work. The next couple of slides, so community integration, symptom management, those are also examples, and I'm going to skip those right now in the interest of time. And then assertiveness and parent training, if those things apply to your situation, these are things you might want to take a look at. Skills development and health services, also important. Rehab counseling, substance abuse services. So those are some general topics to think about when you're getting ready to develop the plan, and think about how these things impact you. So take a look at those slides. If you have any questions about the information, absolutely feel free to talk it over with your employment specialist, or feel free to give us a call at NYESS and we'll be able to kind of walk you through some of those things. Any questions before we move forward?
Which organization, yours or any other one, would be the most direct and informative way to find out about teaching English as a second language?
That is a great question. I live close to a community college, and we get a booklet in the mail from them, and they offer courses on teaching English as a second language. Is that what you're talking about, teaching it?
Yes.
Yep, I would talk with your local community college to see what they might offer. That might be a great first start. Also, the New York State Department of Labor. You guys are in New York City, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you would check with the program managers in New York City associated with the Department of Labor. And down there in the city, Maricela Brea, her last name is spelled B-R-E-A. She is the director of the program there, and you might check with her. If you want to send me an email, I can give you her contact information.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
I don't know if this is for later, but how do you report, what are the ways that you can report your earnings?
I'm sorry, how do you report earnings?
Yes. that was-
Okay, so there are several different ways you can do it. It depends on what benefit type you're on. But there is an SSI app for your phone. So if you have an iPhone, you can get an app and you can just record them there. You can record them on the Social Security website. It's ssa.gov. Yeah, ssa.gov. You can record it there. You can call the Social Security office that's local to you and report it online. Through the phone. you can send your check stubs to Social Security, that local office. However, I would definitely make sure you make a copy of everything you send to them so you have it. And the key point about talking about gosh, I lost my train of thought there for a second. If you are talking about reporting wages, the key point is to get that confirmation number. So once you've reported your wages, they should give you a confirmation number. And you'll need to keep track of that. So if you ever have to prove that you reported your wages, you've got that proof right there that you did.
Okay.
How about SSDA?
I'm sorry?
You said that that's good for SSI, what about SSDA? Is it the same thing?
So yeah, so SSI has the app, the iPhone app you can use, but SSDI can use any of those other options. Online, the Social Security office, SSA.gov, any of those other options as well.
Is there another question? Is there another question? No? Okay, that's all.
Okay. So after we've talked about the possibility of employment, what success means to you, and thinking about what kind of options you're interested in, and then thinking about those considerations when you're putting a plan together, what kind of supports you might need at work. The next step is thinking about general employment topics that might come up that you're interested in learning more about. So especially people who have a limited work history or gaps in history might need some basic information about what going to work means for them. So, and if this is the case, be sure and talk with your employment specialist about these specifics. One of the questions that comes up sometimes is appropriate language. So as you know, people who work on construction sites might be able to get away with some more colorful language than people who work in an office setting. So it's important to know the differences between what's appropriate and not within your workplace. Dress codes, working with a supervisor, specific workplace norms. Those are things that just happen at work that you don't really get told about. They just automatically are expected. Like in our office, for example, we have a Keurig machine. And when the water is low in the Keurig, it's everybody's responsibility to fill that up, whether or not you're getting coffee. So that's just an expectation across the board that everybody has to do, regardless of, them actually using it to get coffee. So it's just a norm. It's just something that happens all the time. And then relationships with coworkers, that's important, remembering to set boundaries as needed, general office rules, and then work ethic. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So the appropriate use of language is one of the most important topics because it can vary depending on where you are. And it can be considered things that include humor or sarcasm that you're using on the job. But it's important to know the work environment, and trying to keep your language respectful is the important piece. But you may be able to, as I mentioned, the construction site, they may be very different from an office conversation. It may be completely okay, but it's just something to know about when you get to work. But it's also important to think about what you're good with. So if you don't want to be surrounded by construction site language, then perhaps that's not a good work environment for you. And so thinking about the environment that you want to work in and what that language might look like is also a consideration when you're looking for a job or thinking about getting a job. Dress code also can vary according to the specific environment that you're in. So it can be anything from a suit and a tie in a professional experience to jeans and t-shirt in a tennis shoe situation. But one of the things that's really important to know is that sagging and holey jeans are never appropriate at work. So you may not be able to do that even on a construction site, because there are going to be things that are important for you to wear, like steel-toed boots, or maybe you have to have specific protective equipment, goggles or gloves, because you're in a situation that requires that. So it really depends on your environment. And general employment rules, what's it like to work with a supervisor? If you have limited experience, it might be something to know about before you get there. Like, how am I supposed to act with a supervisor? Or what are the rules surrounding that relationship? And then how to build the relationships with the coworkers, not sharing too much personal information, but being friendly and outgoing and laugh and joke and whatever you want to do at work, but also making sure that there are boundaries in place to prevent issues in the future. So these are some of the things that working with a supervisor is important to know about: active listening, asking questions if you don't understand something, accepting constructive criticism. And sometimes that's a really difficult thing for us to do, right? And sometimes supervisors don't do a good job of providing constructive criticism. Often it comes across as just criticism. So we need to figure out how we can make that work. And your employment specialist can help you navigate some of these topics. Workplace norms, treating other people with dignity and respect, resisting gossip, being genuine and honest at work, and speaking respectfully. Working with coworkers, we want to make sure that we're able to work as a team, work collaboratively together, help out when needed, being respectful, avoiding gossip. If you have a difficulty with somebody on the job, one of your coworkers, how do you resolve those conflicts? So learning about how to resolve conflicts is really important for any situation, not just at work, but everywhere we find ourselves. So building relationships with coworkers can be a really great thing, but we have to be careful as well. Any questions about those specific topics? I feel like I'm speeding up a little bit, but I'm concerned we may not make it through the whole training, so I'm trying to get it all in.
Yeah, looks like there are no questions.
Okay, great. So this next topic is developing a strong work ethic. So work ethic, what is that? So a work ethic is a principle that hard work is naturally a good thing. And we have a strong work ethic because we have learned or developed it over time, our good work skills, which include the behaviors, our attitudes, the motivation, and our commitment to the work that we're doing. So work ethic is a topic that is often missed when we start talking about employment and rehab for people with disabilities. But I want to make sure that you know work ethic is not a topic just for people with disabilities. It is for everybody that's in the workforce. So it involves everyone. And it's something that we need to include because in order for us to maintain employment, we have to show that we have a good work ethic and that we're doing a good job at work. And so that helps us maintain that job. We sometimes forget or fail to recognize that work ethic is developed through family, social, educational, and early work experiences. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're picking up those cues and that we are getting that information. But it's a learned quality and it's developed through trial and error and observation, and it's the result of our practiced habits. So one of the things that sometimes happens is we get our very first job. Maybe we're out of high school, or maybe we're still in high school and we get this first job. And it's summertime and we feel like, well, maybe we're just going to blow this off and go with our friends someplace. And so that's an example of not really a good work ethic. But the thing that happens is we might get terminated from that job because of attendance. And so the next job that we get, we know that. We know what those consequences are. So we've learned that attendance is a really important thing at work. And so maybe we're going to do better at the second job that we get. So it's all about learning and developing over time. The things that we've learned in the first job or the first early jobs can then help us learn all the way through the rest of our lives. And so picking those things up and helping us get there over time is really important. The other thing is we learn this work ethic skill not only from developing our own trial and error, but from our family or from our social media or education experiences that we've had. So sometimes people don't have good examples of a work ethic, what a good work ethic looks like. And so that can be a problem for people. And so as we walk through this situation, you might find yourself being a mentor for somebody else, realizing that you have a great work ethic. And so I'm going to help my friend learn a good work ethic by helping her understand what I know already. So developing the work ethic can be an important learning experience, but it can also lead to you personally being a mentor for somebody else to help them learn a good work ethic. So there are a lot of core components of what a work ethic means. What is this? And it can be challenging for anybody. Everybody in the world has struggles with some of these things. And so that's something to cut yourself a break on, right? These things are challenging for a lot of people. Being self-motivated, getting up in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and then going to work by 7. That's hard. And you have to be motivated in order to do that. Or in my case, it would be hard for me to work third shift and not get off work until 7 in the morning. That would be terrible for me. So I would not be as motivated as I would be at 7 o'clock in the morning. Then there's self-confidence. So knowing that you can do the job that you were hired to do and being able to do it every day and feeling that confidence. There are challenges that happen throughout a person's day at work. And so being confident in yourself and your skills and abilities to do that job. I mentioned accepting direct criticism. So again, sometimes supervisors just provide criticism and they forget the constructive criticism part, which is supposed to make it easier. But we have to also learn how to accept that criticism and do better in the future, move in a different direction. And then communicating in an appropriate way for a given environment. So sometimes you're communicating via email. You're sending an email to somebody at work to communicate something, or sometimes you're talking on the phone. Whatever that might be, making sure that we're communicating appropriately for that specific idea. Sometimes being organized is difficult for people, so that's something to learn. Planning ahead, maybe some time management skills. Enduring hardships in the workplace. We all have bad days at work. Absolutely every one of us does. And so how do we manage that? How do we get through that day and come back in tomorrow with a new hope or a new feeling that it's going to be a good day? And then navigating the work environment, and who is it that's going to teach you how to get to all the things you need to know about? Is there somebody designated at work who's going to be your buddy for the first 3 months that will help you navigate that work environment? And then managing stressful interpersonal interactions. You know, maybe that conflict resolution I was talking about earlier, maybe there's some stressful things that are going on that you need some help with understanding how to resolve that. So again, your employment specialist can help you put together plans to figure these things out and to make sure that what you're doing is good for you, in a good place for you, and doing the job that you're doing is also beneficial for you. And so as we think about work ethic, thinking about, and I don't want anybody to share, you don't have to share any information, but think about why should a work ethic be important to me? And how did you develop your work ethic? And who was it in your life that modeled behavior about going to work? So thinking about that, and then thinking about how can I incorporate these values into your day-to-day life? So if you had a great mentor, you growing up, you knew exactly what a good work ethic meant because this person demonstrated that for you, then that's great. You may be the mentor for the next person that comes along. If you didn't have a very good mentor or a support system about employment, then maybe there are things that you can learn from other people who can be your mentor to help you learn how to have a good work ethic. But the key to having a work ethic is helping you get the job and then maintaining that job over time. Other things to think about regarding work ethic includes how you prepare to go to work. So if we think about the night before, maybe you're preparing sets you up for that success. So maybe you're going to lay out the clothes you're going to wear the next day, or you're going to think about, I'm going to wear this or that in my closet. Maybe it's getting a good night's sleep. Maybe it's mentally preparing for what the next day will look like. I know I have this really stressful meeting tomorrow, so I'm going to take care of myself this way in order to make that better. Maybe it's the morning prep routine. Maybe you're making sure that your transportation is available for you to get to work. Maybe it's navigating challenges that might derail a plan. So sometimes kids have snow days or they're sick and they have to stay home from school. And if that's the case, maybe Aunt Susie can come over and watch the children while you go to work, or have a backup plan in place so that you don't have to miss work if these things happen. It might include, making your lunch the night before or the morning of to make sure that you're ready to go to work at that time, making sure that those things are all in place. So how we prepare for work and how we think about work is also part of our work ethic. These are just some role play examples. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to speak quickly about these. But this is an example of two coworkers bumping into each other and talking about something. And in this case, Jesse mentions that he's going to duck out early so he can get his weekend started. And Jesse knows that he didn't request the time off. Or Sam knows that Jesse didn't request the time off. So a good work ethic person would say, Sam's going to encourage Jesse to request the time off to follow the work policies. And somebody that has a poor work ethic might say, well, if Jesse can get away with that, then I'm going to try it too. And I'm going to duck out early. What can happen? So it's kind of based on our mindset, and it's how we handle these specific situations that crop up at work and how our reaction to something can impact not only our work ethic, but the person that we're talking to. In this case, Jesse and Sam's work ethic. Here's another example. They're in the kitchen getting ready for lunch, and Jesse shares information that he saw a coworker out with somebody who is not her significant other. And so somebody with a good work ethic might shut down the gossip immediately and respond that it's not appropriate to talk about a coworker or start rumors about a coworker. And then somebody that might have a poor work ethic might just laugh about it and encourage more information about what might be happening with that coworker. So we want to talk about drama, right? We don't want to encourage drama in the workplace, and we want to make sure that we are helping people understand that somebody with a good work ethic does not put up with that. That is not appropriate in the workplace. So that's kind of another example. So these are things that could crop up at work that might serve as a good learning tool for role-playing examples. So when we think about a work ethic, there are some very specific good work ethic qualities that are out there that exist. And so we want to talk about those, and we want to talk about the difference. What are bad work ethic qualities? So good work ethics include reliability, knowing that if somebody asks you to do something, they know that it's going to be finished by the date that it's due. Dependability, knowing that you're at work every day when you're supposed to be there. Oftentimes my example is a person is hired to work at 8 o'clock and they work from 8 to 5. But then they show up at 8:05 and then they go get their coffee and then they chat with some coworkers and then they get back to their desk about 9 o'clock. So that is not a dependable worker. That is somebody who does not have a good work ethic. And it's important to think about that. If you're hired to start work at 8 o'clock, you should be at your desk and starting work at 8 o'clock. So you come 15 minutes early and get your coffee and chat for a few minutes, and then you get to work. Productivity, and that just means, you know, everybody works at their own pace. Typically, we can't enforce everybody working at a fast pace, but it's important to know that you are working at your pace consistently, that you are able to get your work done, and the productivity of that work is good. And then ownership and autonomy. So that just means making sure that if you turn something in, that you are taking ownership of it. And if there is a mistake in it, you can say, I'm sorry, that was my mistake. I'll redo that. Or standing up to say, yes, I did that. And I expect that this is going to be approved because I did this, this, and this. And this is how it was supposed to happen. And I did it that way. And here it is. And so making sure that you're just taking ownership of whatever it is that you're doing. And then working collaboratively with a team. So all of your coworkers form a team. And so making sure that you can work together as a group, but also making sure that you can work independently. So that's the autonomy piece, is working independently, but then collaborating and having team support when necessary. So those are some good examples of a work ethic that would be a great work ethic for that person at work. And then here's some examples of poor work ethic. So a low work quality, like you turn things in, but you forget to do spell check, or being consistently tardy at work, or coming back late from lunches or breaks, having a lack of attention to detail, missing things that you shouldn't, focusing on your own goals at the expense of the greater team or the company goals, and then abuse and harassment. And this can include things like language. Sometimes sarcasm and humor can create a harassment or a feeling of harassment by others, or sabotaging others, setting somebody up to fail at whatever task that they're doing. So these are some examples of a poor work ethic quality. So we don't want to go this way, right? We want to make sure that we focus on having good work ethic qualities. Any questions about anything related to work ethic?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
At a previous job I had about 35 years ago, a long time ago, maybe dating myself. It was in another state, and the supervisor of my boss kept on telling me that I think that your mother raised you wrong. He kept on insulting me like that. And kept on treating me in a very abusive way. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what HR department was really. And what should I have done if I was in that sort of situation? I have a good job now. I have good supervisors now. But if I'm ever in that kind of situation again in a different sort of workplace, what should I do?
That's a great question. And I'm absolutely thrilled that you have a good work environment right now and your supervisors are very supportive. That's great.
Yes.
Anything to do with a supervisor having or treating you disrespectfully or saying things that are disrespectful to you and you're feeling like it's a problem, I would, and I know this is tough, it's hard, but going to the supervisor and talking to that person and saying, hey, you hurt my feelings when you said this, or I think we should talk about this because I don't agree with what you said to me. Or talking about like, I heard you say this, but actually I think I'm doing really well and this is why. So things like that, but that's a really hard thing to do. Conflict with a supervisor is really difficult, but that would be the first step. And then you're right, when you talked about HR, so human resources have a way to be able to mediate some of those conflict situation conversations. So probably going to an HR department, if you don't feel comfortable talking directly to the supervisor, you could go to the HR and say, I need some help with this. And they should be willing to listen.
Environment is a good environment.
I'm sorry, what?
Thank God my current environment is a good environment.
Absolutely. I'm glad too.
Any other questions? Okay, looks like that's all.
Okay. So this next section is about benefits. And so I know we had a lot of questions early on about some benefit questions. And I just want to make sure that I emphasize that if you have specific scenarios within your life that you need answers to, we won't be able to talk about them here in this particular training, but I absolutely would encourage you to reach out to a certified benefits advisor or connect with me and I will help you get connected. The thing about benefits is that you don't have to be an expert because there are people in the world who are experts and they are called certified benefits advisors. And that's their whole job, is to help you figure out how going to work is going to impact your benefits. We talked about wages having to be reported in all scenarios. So everybody who goes to work has to report their wages if they're on a Social Security disability benefit. If there are overpayments, so sometimes you hear horror stories about overpayments. If you do get a notice from Social Security about an overpayment, it's also a good idea to talk to a benefits advisor. Because if you've reported your income every month and you've got that confirmation number to confirm that, then they may be able to get a waiver for you not to have to pay the overpayment. They may be able to say, it was not your fault. You you reported your wages all along. It is a Social Security problem. And they may be able to get you out of that overpayment status. So that's important to know as well. And then if you earn enough money for cash benefits to stop, we talked about this already, that there may be free Medicaid through 1619B and the Medicaid buy-in program. And then another thing that we want to talk about today is if you want to save more money than you can. So if you're on SSI benefits, there's a limit to how much money you can have in assets. There are ways to do that. We can save money by opening an ABLE account and a PASS plan. So I'll talk to you about those two scenarios too. So let's get started with SSI. So SSI is called Supplemental Security Income. And this is a Social Security benefit payment to people who have limited income and limited resources. So the resource limit in 2025 is $2,000. And that means for an individual, you can have $2,000 in your savings account or your checking account or some sort of assets. But if you go over to $2,001, you potentially will lose your SSI payment. So it's really important to be aware of that scenario, but they don't count a vehicle. So if you own your own vehicle, they wouldn't count that against your assets. And if you own your own home, they wouldn't count that against your assets either. The other thing about Social Security SSI is that they start with what's called a federal benefit rate. And in 2025, that rate is $967. And what they do with that money is they take a look at your unearned income first. So that's any money that you get that you didn't earn, you didn't go to work to get. It could be child support payments. That could be considered unearned income. They also take a look at your earned income, which is the money that you get from your job, your wages. And then they take a look at any work incentives that you might be eligible for. And we'll talk about what those are in just a second. But something also important to know about these figures is that they can change every year. So the asset limit has not changed in several years, but the federal benefit rate does change every year. So that's something to know about going into this. SSI offers several different work incentives. And so remember, a work incentive is created by Social Security to help you keep your money as long as you can, your disability benefit as long as you can. And they've created these four, and there are a couple of more, but these are just the four major ones that I've included. Student earned income exclusion, the impairment related work expense, or an IRWE, you might have heard it called that, a blind work expense, and a subsidy or special condition. So the student earned income exclusion allows a person who is under the age of 22 to exclude some of their income that they've earned at work from their calculation of Social Security benefit to keep their money. So the caveat with this is that they have to be under the age of 22. They have to be regularly attending school. So you would go part-time or full-time, it doesn't matter. And you would be working also either part-time or full-time. So in 2025, the amount that can be excluded is $2,350 a month, up to an annual maximum of $9,460. So in our example, let's say a 19-year-old person is attending school part-time and they're working part-time. And let's say they earn $1,000 in 1 month from their job. And so this person will let Social Security know, because he has to report his income, right? So he's going to let Social Security know that he wants to use the student earned income exclusion for that month because he had wages. So he reports the wages to Social Security and sends confirmation that he's still attending school. And then he can use the benefit for each month up to the annual maximum. So in January, if my person, Susie, earns $1,000 and she's going to school and she's under the age of 22, she can claim both that $1,000 on the student earned income exclusion and get all of her SSI benefit check. So she might be getting $1,967 a month instead of Social Security subtracting that $1,000 from the calculation for her benefit. So it can be a huge benefit for people who are under the age of 22. The impairment-related work expense are costs for items or services that you need to go to work because of the disability that you have, and the costs are not being reimbursed by anybody else. So Social Security deducts the cost of the IRWE expense from your countable income when they determine your eligibility for Social Security. So you say, well, what could that be? So keeping in mind that it's for items or services that you need in order to go to work because of your disability, but you're paying for it out of pocket and it's not being reimbursed by anybody else. So these are some things that could be included. If you're getting supported employment services and you're paying for them yourself, maybe you're doing attendant care or medical devices, or you have a prosthetic, work-related equipment, or medications where you're paying a co-payment, or a doctor appointment where you're paying a co-payment, therapy, any of those things can count as an IRWE example. Transportation cost is a little bit trickier because there's some regulations around transportation. And I'll just go over the first example. If public transportation is available in the community and you can take that transportation, then it cannot be used as an IRWE expense. But if public transportation is available and the individual cannot use it for some reason, then it might be able to be used as an IRWE expense. So that's a great idea, a great thing for people. These IRWEs have to be approved through Social Security. So if you're paying out of pocket for things, you would keep the receipt, you would fill out a form that says, I paid this $25 for a copay at my doctor's office 3 times this month. So I want to use $75 toward an IRWE, and you would submit it to Social Security and get approval, and then they will follow up in the next month regarding that specific IRWE expense that you're using. The blind work expense is very similar to the IRWE, because both are costs for items that you need to go to work and they're not being reimbursed by anybody else. But the exception is the blind work expense does not have to be related to the specific disability. So if there's someone who has blindness or low vision and they have to have these things in order to go to work and they're paying for them themselves, then that could be considered a blind work expense. Again, it has to be something of reasonable cost according to Social Security that is customarily charged for the covered or similar expenses. And it's the same list as the IRWI. So it can be any of those things, same as the transportation. And I'll flip through the transportation cost, but it's really important to know that it does not have to be related to an individual's blindness in order to use that specific work incentive. There's also something called a subsidy and special condition work incentive. A subsidy is an extra wage that an employer would pay to an individual for services over the reasonable value of the actual service. So that's a lot of words. What does that mean? Essentially, it means that we have two people that are hired to do the same job. They have exactly the same job description, job title, and they are making the same amount of money, working the same number of hours. However, one person is not required to do as much productivity as the other person does. It's a subsidy. So the employer will identify that that person is getting the same wage for the same job, but is not doing the same level of productivity. And Social Security recognizes that that is a subsidy given to that person and will be able to use that as they calculate the SSI payment for that person. A special condition would exist when a worker receives support or services from somebody other than the employer, subsidizing the worker's ability to perform SGA, which is substantial gainful activity. But what that means is, let's say my example, Susie is at work and she needs the job coach to come in and help her learn how to do her job duties. So the job coach spends a half an hour helping Susie learn that, or actually doing the job duties so that Susie can learn by watching. And so that's a special condition, that we have a third party, a job coach, coming in and helping Susie learn her job. And so that special condition is also identified from the employer to Social Security when they figure out the SSI payment for Susie in her job. So that is another work incentive, subsidy and special condition. Any questions before we move on to SSDI benefits?
I'm not trying to understand the extra weight, the substitute.
I'm sorry.
Can you explain about subsidies again, please?
Explain what?
About subsidies?
Subsidies.
I
Okay,
didn't understand this.
so there's two things on the slide. There's one that's called a subsidy and there's one that's called a special condition. So the subsidy is two people who are earning the same wages, getting the same job description, and the same job title. And yet they're not required to do as much productivity as the other person. So if they're doing, let's say they're doing widgets, and person A is supposed to do 2,000 widgets a day, and person B is only required to do 1,500 widgets a day. So there is a specific gap in the amount of productivity that person is performing. But the employer is going to notify Social Security and let them know that there is a subsidy involved. And that's just giving that person extra in order to be able to be successfully employed. But Social Security manages that when they are configuring the SSI disability check. Is that better? It's something that the employer and Social Security manage together. Okay. Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI. So this is when Social Security provides cash benefits to an individual who have worked and paid into the Social Security insurance program. And a person, and there are a lot of exceptions to these rules with Social Security. So I want to just mention that I'm talking about an average adult. Not a younger person, and not an older person, but just somebody in the middle, somebody average. So what happens is this person goes to work and they earn work credits, and they're required to earn 40 work credits. And a person can earn up to 4 work credits per year. So if they need 40, that means they're going to have to work 10 years in order to be eligible for SSDI benefits. So if a person works those 10 years, they have those 40 work credits, and then 3 months later, they are in a car accident and they're now disabled. They are now eligible for the SSDI disability benefit check. And when that happens, SSDI benefit amount that you get is actually going to be based on the earnings over your working years. So it's not based necessarily on an average, but it's some formula that Social Security comes up with to help you figure out how much money you're going to get in your benefit. Then also note that these rates that are listed are also have the potential to change at the start of every new year. So as we work through this process, just know that these numbers change every year. So Social Security provides a cash benefit to people who've worked and paid into the system. And there are several work incentives that are available for people who receive SSDI. So one of them is the impairment-related work expense, and we already talked about that one, right? That's the IRWE, and it's exactly the same for SSI as it is for SSDI. There's also something called the trial work period and extended period of eligibility. And we talked about the expedited reinstatement, so we'll revisit that a little bit so you have that information as well. So I'm going to fly through the IRWE because we already talked about it with SSI, and we are closing in on 3 o'clock. So the IRWE is the expense for items that you need to, because you have to have them to go to work, and it's because of your disability, but they're not being reimbursed by anybody else. Again, this is the same list that we talked about before, examples. Then the trial work period is the next work incentive, and this will allow you to test your ability to work for at least 9 months without losing your SSDI benefits. So you're going to receive the full SSDI cash benefit regardless of how high your earnings are, as long as you report your work activity and you continue to have a disabling impairment. So the trial work period begins when you earn over $1,160 per month. And in 2020, that's the 2025 number. So an example would be if you currently receive SSDI and you want to go to work, then you have that 9-month period to earn as much money as you want or as you can as a safety net to see how working goes. Oftentimes people say you can make Bill Gates money during that time period, that 9 months. So hopefully you all know who Bill Gates is. He makes a lot of money per month. If in January, the individual earns $1,160, then January is going to count as that first trial work period month. But if the individual's income falls below that amount in February, then that month does not count as the trial work period month. So the trial work months don't have to be consecutive. It could go up and down, but once you hit that 9th month, then it flips automatically into a different process. And that is called the extended period of eligibility. And this is immediately begins after trial work period ends, and it's a 36-month period in which you receive Social Security cash benefits for all months that your earnings are below the SGA. So in trial work period, it's all about the trial work level, that dollar amount. And now that we're in this period of time, it goes to the SGA, or substantial gainful activity. And in 2025, that amount is $1,620. So if a person is done with the trial work period and they go into this extended period of eligibility and they earn over $1,620 the very first time, Social Security will begin to start to terminate their benefits. They have a cessation month and then 2 grace period months, and then the benefits no longer exist. And so if during this process, though, the individual loses their benefit, but during this 36-month period, they fall underneath that SGA level again, they can get their SGA check or their SDI check back relatively quickly. And then we talked about this process, and this is if somebody who goes to work and they have worked off of their benefits, they've replaced their Social Security disability benefits with wages, and they're successfully employed, and everything is going great. And then at one point, something happens. Maybe they are hospitalized, or there's an accident, or they lose their job. Their SGA level falls below that required amount, and they need their benefit back. If it happens within 5 years of the date that they got terminated from their benefit, then they could call expedited reinstatement, talk to Social Security, and ask them to do an expedited reinstatement of their benefits. And this will then allow them to get their benefit while Social Security is thinking about it, reviewing it. And then at the end, Social Security may say, yes, you absolutely get your benefit back, and we're going to pick up sending you the benefit as we have been. Or they could say, no, the same diagnosis that you got when you got your benefit is different now. And so you no longer qualify under your old diagnosis, but you may be able to reapply for benefits under a new diagnosis or new symptoms that you might be having. So it could go either way, but it depends on the disability that you were originally diagnosed with and awarded disability benefits for. If that remains the same and your symptoms are the same and nothing is improved, chances are you will still be able to maintain that benefit. If things have changed and there's a different disability, you may not be able to get that back, but you can always reapply at that point for a benefit with a new disability diagnosis. It is 3 o'clock. Would you like me to continue, or would you prefer that I stop here?
Yeah, we could continue another 5 minutes.
I'm sorry?
You could continue just another couple of minutes.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so healthcare, and this is super important for people to know about because you don't want to lose your healthcare benefits. So there's this program called 1619B of Medicaid that allows people to maintain their coverage even if their earnings are too high to continue getting SSI benefits. And if you're eligible for 1619B, it will be an automatic process. So what happens is you go to work, you get your job, and Social Security has that limit of how much money you can earn. And they say maybe you're working over that amount, so you're no longer going to get your SSI check. You've replaced your SSI benefits with income. So now you're no longer getting SSI. But we want to help you maintain Medicaid, so Social Security will recognize that you're earning too much for your SSI, but you still need Medicaid benefits, so they will switch you over to 1619B. The requirements are that you were eligible for SSI at least 1 month, and that you would be eligible for a cash benefit except for the earnings, because you're earning too much money according to that benefit ratio. You're still disabled, you still meet all the eligibility rules and requirements, and you need Medicaid in order to work, and you have gross income that is insufficient to replace SSI or Medicaid. So one of the questions comes up about that is, if you're working and earning more money, why do you still need Medicaid? But sometimes an employer's healthcare coverage is not enough. Maybe it's too expensive for the person to get, and it may not cover some of those things that you've been getting from Medicaid all those years. So for example, attendant care. Oftentimes a employer's health plan will not cover attendant care services for someone. And so it still remains critical for that person to get the services they need through the Medicaid coverage. So if those things apply, then yes, Social Security can automatically flip the switch and you're still eligible for your Medicaid coverage. There's another program called the Medicaid Buy-in for working people with disabilities. And this is over and above 1619B. So it actually allows you to earn more money than ever. Like an individual can earn up to $73,000 and still keep their Medicaid coverage. The thing about this that's different is that you actually have to go and apply for it. It is not an automatic process, and it does say buy-in. But right now, we are not requiring people to pay a premium for this coverage. So if you're working and you're earning $70,000, and so you're no longer eligible for 1619B, you might be eligible for Medicaid buy-in. You would go to Department of Health and apply for Medicaid buy-in. It allows you to earn up to $73,932, and you can have resources up to $30,000, which is absolutely wonderful for people. It helps people be able to save money. It helps, for retirement benefits, all kinds of different things that you need to spend money on. It's an amazing program for people. There's a link to an MBI toolkit, but it is not complete yet. They're in the process of updating it, but that should be the same link when it gets fully updated. And then Medicare. So individuals who are on SSDI benefits also may be on Medicare coverage. And we talked about the trial work period. Once that ends, individuals can have 93 months, which is 7 years and 9 months of Medicare coverage, premium free, which is amazing. It allows you to have hospital insurance, which is Part A. And if you've already enrolled in supplemental medical, which is Part B, and prescription drug coverage, Part D, you can still get them premium free as well for those 7 years and 9 months. After that premium free Medicare coverage ends, you can still buy continued Medicare coverage as long as you remain disabled. So it is a huge benefit for people that may or may not know they can get free healthcare insurance and still maintain that benefit for them. Okay, and the last section of this presentation today just talks about various resources that we have available. So there's a connection to our NYESS website. The Customer Resources tab has a lot of information about benefits. There's the Ticket to Work website, choosework.ssa.gov, talks a lot about work incentives, excuse me, and availability of Ticket to Work in the program. There are also things called WISE webinars. So they're work incentive webinar events. They're free for people to attend, no cost, and they talk about how working will impact your benefits. There's the link to register, and it's a monthly service. Again, no cost to attend. They are for beneficiaries, but anybody can attend. Family, friends, employment specialists, other staff, anybody who wants to. It's a great idea. I've also included the Job Seeker's Guide to Employment, a little bit a tool to help you look for work if you're interested in that. I've also included the SSI and SSDI fact sheets for 2025, so you can rely on that as a quick sheet to look at about benefits and what they mean. And then the New York State Department of Labor SCION project, which we talked about, the disability resource coordinators in upstate New York and the program managers in the city. They are certified benefits advisors and can help you navigate benefits questions. And then this is my contact information. So I will stop the screen there. There we go. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help. If you want to reach out to me via email or phone, please feel free to do that as well. I'm sorry that I went over and held you a little bit longer. There's so much stuff to say.
Thank you, that was so
Thanks so much.
informative.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Sorry, just a second, that was really informative and clear, so we're
Yes.
so grateful, and by the way, there's this, you see the room, you see us here, there's a second side to the room with the same number of chairs and the number of people as well. Any other questions before we close off? We are gonna share the slide, so if you missed anything or contact information, we will send that out. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
I'd like to thank Lisa Brown. I'd like to correct one thing she said, though. If you're in Bill Gates' money, you won't be diagnosed with mental illness, you'll be eccentric instead.
I'm sorry, I think I missed part of that.
If you have Bill Gates' money, if you're in Bill Gates' money, like you were saying earlier, you eccentric instead.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have Bill Gates money at least for 1 month, just to try it out, see how we would do? That would be great.
Thank you, very much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa Brown, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much for having me join. I enjoyed it very much. All right.
And thank you everyone for joining. We, as Lisa mentioned, we hope to send out the slides. If you're on the, if you pre-registered,
I don't know if I really
you pre-registered. If you pre-registered, then I have your email. I can send it to you. Otherwise, please come to me now and I can send you the slides as well.
What
do you mean?
The slides.
Everybody.
The whole thing?